Hi, welcome back. I've done a lot of work since the last episode. This is the Kansas City Streets 2, and what I've done, of course, is gone in and actually taken the buildings that we were talking about making a little less plastic looking. We added on the 3D printed parts, the Cricut parts. I've gone in, I've taken all of these buildings apart and repainted them with the dull coats. I've added some weathering here on the steps. I've painted the foundations and basically tried to make them look different. Where I had brackets in here, I've now taken those out, and you can kind of see that they have a little bit of a different look, all trying to make them look a little bit more individual. So what we now can do is take a look at what we're going to do to make this look like a realistic scene. And my first thing to go is I need to do something about this background back here. All of this just does not hold with the way I want the scene to look. So what I'm going to do is take the height of my trees here. That's the top of my scene. And I'm going to transfer that to the background. So I want my trees and my background buildings or whatever I put back here to be at least up about that high. That's going to justify the height of my tree. And this tree is a fairly low tree for O scale. It's only about 12 inches, so it's only about 50 feet. It's a fairly young tree, and a mature tree, even in the Kansas City area, might be 75 to 100 feet. So even another 6 inches or even another foot would have been okay. But a 1 footer is believable, so we'll stick with that. We tend to make things a little smaller in model railroading. So I'll transfer that to the background. I'm going to paint my trees up at least that high all the way along. The other thing I need to know is I need to know where these foreground pieces are going to meet the background. And so give me a minute, I'll be right back, and we'll show you what we do after I get the buildings out of the way. I'm back, and what I've done is I've taken off all of the buildings and the tree. And so now you can begin to see where these various platforms for my buildings, the gratings that the city did to make the building set flat, occur. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to take a pencil and I want to draw on my background here exactly where these platforms are. So I'm going to come along and make some tracings, and I've actually already done that one so you can see. And that's going to give me a view then of exactly where all of these platforms are. Now I know where to put my scenery back here on the back. So I'm going to go ahead and pull all of this off. All of this module is not attached, it's just sitting there loose. So I'm going to pull all of these out so I can get to the background. And that's what this episode is about, painting the background. So we'll start. Hi. Welcome to my world. I'm sitting on top of it actually. And you notice that I've obviously removed all of the city. And now I'm ready to start painting my background. And I've made a pencil mark up here at the height where that tree was. And I've got, of course, my marks down here for where my steps are. So now I'm ready to start painting. So let's take a look at the paints that will actually be used. And what I have here, use my iPad to point, sorry about that. Have a palette, have some browns. I like raw rather than burnt. Burnt simply means that the color is going to be red. Raw umber, raw sienna are pure browns. Burnt sienna and burnt umber are reddish browns. So always remember the reddish part, or the burnt at least. All right, then I go into some greens. I have a favorite color called Hooker's Green, simply because it blends very well with the Woodland Scenics colors that I use so much of in the ground foams. And then the other is to use some light green oxide or some lighter greens for my tree colors. Now, I'm going to paint in O scale. So this is a 4-inch brush. It's a big guy. I've also got my original artist brush. It's a great thing to do to be able to go off to the hobby shop and buy some more stuff. Okay, so and then the last thing I've got is I've got some smaller brushes here that I can use for painting the trunks of the trees that I'm going to put in here. I don't want too much detail, and I'm going to do the same thing that I normally would do when I paint the clouds. Now, these were all done with the stencils from New London Industries. And I'm sorry, it's my only selling point, but they are made by my best friend, John Lawrence. I have no financial ties with him, actually, but I love his stencils. He put them out originally, I believe, around 1984 in Railroad Model Craftsman. And it's a fantastic way, I think, to get a very realistic looking cloud. And there's all kinds of instructions out there on how to do it, including Trainmasters and a few others. So my clouds are up and they're up above. What I'm going to paint is my tree level, so I should be okay. Okay, I have raw umber here, raw sienna. Again, they are not reds because they're raw, they're not burnt. I have a light green oxide, and I have the Hooker's green. Now, the other thing that I've done is I have watched a lot of the shows on PBS with the artists like William Alexander. And so all I did here was just simply paint a trunk. I've put some trunk structure on some of these others, but now I'm just going to come around here, and the secret to this whole thing, as far as I'm concerned, is that you daub. You don't paint, you stab. Stab that color in there. And it really doesn't make any difference too much anyway what kind of pattern I do, just so long as I get some color fired in there. Okay, fire those happy trees in. But down in here I want to cover up a bunch of this too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in bushes. And I'm going to bring those bushes up fairly high, almost into the bottom branch structure of the tree. Just dabbing in. The other thing I did here, and I think you can tell it, let's go to even the closer up camera. I've got some lighter colors here on the right hand side of those trees to kind of simulate sunlight. That was the light brown, or the sienna, the raw sienna, which is a much lighter brown than the raw umber, which was the main tree trunk. So now what I want to do is I want to add that same highlight to these branches of these bushes. And the way to do that is to come in here and get some light green oxide, and it doesn't make any difference that I'm on one side or the other of the bush. It just makes a difference that I put some. I love that. That's a term that Malcolm Furlow made so popular over several years, that put some technique. He just put some color in. And I'm guilty of saying the same thing, but I'm not an artist. I'm just going to dab some color in here. Anybody that's an artist can tell I'm not. But there we go. And what I've got now is, I think, a fairly good representation of a stand of trees and some bushes down below. So I'll do a little fast action recording on the rest of this. I am going to take it the rest of the way around here, because back in here is where my cemetery is going to be. So I need those trees up at that same high level all the way around this corner. Stick with me, we'll paint it quickly. I want to stop for just a second and talk about some things that I've discovered now as I've started to paint some of these trees. Let's take a little close-up look and see. As far as the trees go, to me, this naked forest over here looks far better than the forest over here, and even better than what some of this looked like originally. It was a little too sparse in through the area between the trees. So I started painting some trees in between here, which helps out some. But now I've got trees all over here, and I think that's going to be much better when I go to put the green in. We'll see over the next little bit here as we speed up and I put some of that green in place. So looking much, much better, I think, as far as the stand of trees. To me, it's much better with more of those trunks and more sizes than it was over here where I was doing it more sparse. So better off to go ahead and get some more trees in, more trunks in, make it look a little bit better. Okay, so including costume changes, I had to take the microphone off and on several times, but I've managed to paint about 5 feet of background here. I'm about 4 feet out and a couple of feet here, so maybe 6 feet. But it didn't take me very long. Now, a lot of people would stop at this point, but I don't like to stop at this point, because What I have here is what an old friend of mine from San Antonio, who's since passed away, used to say, and that's a bilious background. It jumps out at you. It's too alive. One of the things that John and I talk about when we talk about painting the stencil background for the clouds is to take that same flat white paint and to mist over this area in here. So I'm going to mist over those trees because in order to create distance, a real artist would have mixed these colors differently to make them look further away. And it missed it. And if you ever doubt the theory of this, get up in the morning, especially if you're in an area where you have any kind of rolling hills, and look out early in the morning. And you'll see the furthest away one is really in a heavy mist. Then another hill may be in front of you and it's a little lighter. It has a little more color, but it's still misty. And another hill in front of that and it's still misty, but the colors are really starting to come alive. And anything that has atmosphere between you and it will have a mist look to it. I want my real trees to be up here close. I want this to be just what we painted it as, a background. You saw from the images just a minute ago, before I put all of this back into place, that the trees weren't looking too bad. But I had one problem, and I always like to admit it when I make a mistake. I left this opening in here for the roadway, which was good, but I didn't like that it was totally blue. So what I did was I looked at it and said, well, if I trailed this line of bushes off a little bit, it would look like the road was kind of bending and it was going off in the distance. So that's what I did. I came back and I added these bushes in. Now I'm still waiting to mist this, and I'll do that in just a minute. I do want to talk about the PBS series that talks about painting. Be sure and watch them because they're absolutely fantastic, and you'll get the idea very quickly. Well, if he can do it, I can do it, and that's true, you can. And if you do it and you don't really feel like you're becoming an artist, go out to your garage, get a piece of cardboard, or I got just a piece of gator board, cut a hole in it, and when you put your thumb through this, trust me, you'll feel a lot more like an artist. Just kidding, okay. But it does make you feel pretty good. And you do get the idea that you can kind of mess with it and make it happen. The best thing that you can do with your railroad is to do it yourself. Because if I have to come back in here and I have to tear this wall out for some electrical repair or plumbing repair or whatever it happens to be, I can come back and I can make a change to that myself. I don't have to worry about somebody else coming in here and working on it. It's mine. I can change it. The other thing is that then my railroad looks the same all the way around. Let's mist with the white real quick. I think you'll see what a great difference it makes once the white paint goes on. This is what I use to mist everything back, the Krylon flat white, and we use the same thing for the clouds. Everything's looking pretty good, I think. I've got trees back in here behind, and as you can see, I have trees all along in here. I will put trees back behind the commercial buildings because I think that would be more residential back in behind that, so I'll continue that painting. The last thing I want to talk about is you never want to let anyone see, and that includes me or anybody else, the joint between the layout and the background. So Bob Brown, bless his heart, he did a great job of giving us all kinds of ideas, and one of the things he said was, put a fence in there, and there's a fence in place. And to me, that's a great way to hide where the railroad meets the background. Fantastic. I'll put fences all along there. And that's the subject of our next episode. When I come back, we'll show you how to put in the driveways and the street. Come back and be a part of that episode as well. Thanks for coming, and until we see each other again, happy model railroading.